Everybody, welcome to the videos for my core plays for Week 13 of the NFL season over on DraftKings. We're going my 3 favorite cash and tournament plays on the entire slate. Also talk a little bit about prize picks as well. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, got a fish number over on Patreon. Let's have extra content over there. If you do enjoy the free content over on YouTube, I'm sure like the extra stuff over on the Patreon, including ownership projections, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, all that fun stuff, not just for the NFL, but the NBA, NASCAR, and the MLB as well. So if you want to check it out, you know where to find it. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by Prize Picks. I'm sure most of you know it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 mass contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you sign over on Prize Picks, you can get a free money bonus. This is deposit match up to $100, either using the link down below or heading over to prizepicks.com and use code CPIN and tell them I sent you. But without further ado, let's dive into this week's video. And starting us off with cash game core play number 1, I'm going to say there is a lot of good running backs, especially in this price range on this slate. But the one that stands above the rest is Antonio Gibson here, $5,700, and he's going to be the main RB in this backfield for Washington this weekend, with J.D. McKissic currently being out for the football team. So that's going to be a big boost to Gibson, especially in the passing game. And even with McKissic playing the majority of the game last week, we still saw Gibson on Monday night versus Seattle see 7 targets and catch all 7 of them. He was a former wide receiver in college. The guy is a very capable pass-catching option. Plus, he had over 25 carries in that game as well, close to around 35 total opportunities. So no reason not to like Antonio Gibson in this spot. Only $5,700 versus a pretty weak Las Vegas defense versus the run so far this year, allowing the 4th most points for running backs, 17th DVA versus the run. So in cash games this weekend, there's lots of good pivots and tournaments away from Antonio Gibson at this price point, like Eli Mitchell, James Conner, Jamaal Williams is going to be pretty chalky. I think he's more of a cash game play, but lots of good plays in this price range. But in cash games, I am fully expecting Antonio Gibson to be the highest owned player on the slate, let alone at the running back position. So I'm just going to eat the chalk here. I just think he's a phenomenal play. I don't really see how he doesn't hit here unless he just is not involved in the passing game and just gets stiffed on the ground, which I really don't see happening here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. And I also love his receiving prop over on Prize Picks this weekend. It's only at 18.5, and again, no J.D. McKissic. And Antonio Gibson, this would be interesting even with McKissic playing. When you take him out of the equation, I don't see him not getting over that. I mean, obviously, things can happen where he just catches like 4 balls for like 12 yards. But DraftKings has it at 20.5. The juice is on the over. He's minus 120, go over on that. I'm thinking 18.5 is just a little bit too low, especially with no J.D. McKissic. And moving on to cash game, core play number 2, I feel like he's been on here several times so far this year. But for the most part, he tends to play well besides last week. We won't talk about last week because I think every good play, and almost every guy I talked about, did poorly last weekend. But hopefully you guys can bounce back. And Chris Godwin, once again, too cheap. I don't know what it is, but DraftKings does not price the Buccaneers appropriately. Like every single week, Tom Brady, Godwin, Evans, even Gronkowski's priced up a little bit this weekend. And Leonard Fournette all just seem a bit too cheap for being on the offense, but typically one of, if not the highest implied team total on the entire slate, which currently they do have the highest implied team total of 30 points this weekend versus the Falcons' poorest defense. And I know he busted last week, but like I said, $6,600 for arguably the 1A, 1B for Tom Brady. It's just too good to pass up. And we're all playing Tom Brady in cash games this weekend. And Tom Brady does not get there by himself. He needs his pass-catching options. Tom Brady's rushing prop is 0.5 yards. He's not going to get the job done himself. One of these guys has to have very solid games, obviously. They can all have solid games, but Chris Godwin's the guy I would prefer the most. He's just way too cheap. Projections love him. He's just jamming in all my lineups when I pop up the optimizer. So $6,600, I would take it for a guy out there on a 20% target share, over 7 targets per game. And again, no Antonio Brown is definitely a boost for all the pass-catching options of the Falcons this year. 29th DVA versus the pass and 20th versus wide receivers. So sign me up for all the Chris Godwin. Should be a nice bounce back spot for the Buccaneers passing attack. And if you're looking at his props over on Prize Picks, they're always a little bit lower on Godwin than DraftKings is. He's currently sitting at 65.5. DraftKings at 69.5. He's averaging 73 in the season. And it's not like a massive value here, but I wouldn't mind hitting the over at 65.5. It's not one of my favorite plays, but I do think it's a little bit too low. And moving on to cash game core play number 3, we have Jamaal Williams, RB1 this weekend for the Detroit Lions. I know that's not a super exciting play or anything, but it's purely just a price and volume play because last week, Thanksgiving, he didn't start the game obviously, but DeAndre Swift got hurt very early on. Still finished the game with 15 carries, 5 targets. We know the running backs for the Lions always get targeted, so I'm assuming Jamaal Williams will probably see 5+ targets in this game and probably around like 10 to 15, if not more, carries, depending on how game script's going to go. But it's a good spot versus the Minnesota Vikings. They're currently 29th DVA versus the run and they're also 23rd versus running backs this season. So this is not a sexy play. This is purely just a price play. In projections, he's going to grade out quite well. I was tempted to go with Jonathan Taylor here, but I do think you could either go with him or Cooper Kupp as your spend-up option, especially in cash games this weekend. And I'm more than likely punting / going mid-range at the running back position with at least 2 of those guys. So I left Jonathan Taylor out and decided to go with the 2 value running backs. And if you're looking at price picks and DraftKings, price picks currently has them at 54.5 compared to 59.5 on DK, and both have similar receiving props. And moving on to the GPP side of things, we're going to start off with Joe Mixon here, RB1 for the Cincinnati Bengals, $8,100. I love him in tournaments this weekend because there are so many good running backs on this slate that some of these guys just have to go lower owned just because we can't play 5 running backs per lineup. And there's a lot of other good running backs on the slate that are a lot cheaper. People are going to be playing Jonathan Taylor. Well, not cheaper, but he's a spend-up option. Alexander Mattison, similar price point. Now, once you get cheaper, we have Eli Mitchell, James Conner, David Montgomery, Jamal Williams, Antonio Gibson, Darrell Henderson if he happens to play. If he happens to be out, you have Sony Michel. The list goes on. Lots of good plays down low. So Joe Mixon more than likely is going to get a bit overlooked. And I have him right around like the bottom of the top 10 in terms of ownership for running backs this weekend. This is a fantastic spot versus the Los Angeles Chargers. They're currently dead last, 32nd DB versus the run, laying over 120 rushing yards per game. Joe Mixon has been a touchdown scoring machine recently. Out of all the running backs on the slate, he's averaging the most carries per game, close to 20. He's going to get plenty of volume. The 3-point favorites, they're playing at home. This should be a high-scoring game. I see no reason at all to not like Joe Mixon versus the run funnel defense. So in tournaments, absolutely love playing him at what should be some pretty low ownership relatively to the other running backs on this slate. DraftKings did not have any odds for him on his rushing, but I did like his price picks at 86.5 as he could definitely go over as he's averaging just around 85 rushing yards per game, and this is a plus matchup for him. And moving on to our second GPP core play, I don't normally talk about tight ends in these videos, but George Kittle at $5,900 is looking like an awesome leverage play in this slate because everyone is playing the cheap Foster Moreau at $2,700, so no Darren Waller. Just makes a lot of sense. He's going to soak up a ton of ownership. A lot of people are playing Tom Brady, so they're going to pair him up with Rob Gronkowski at a somewhat similar price point to George Kittle at $5,300. Everyone's playing Eli Mitchell. Not everyone, but a large chunk of people are playing Eli Mitchell. So what's not to like about George Kittle with no Deebo Samuel? Like, he's going to go a bit overlooked. I'm not saying no one's going to play him, but relative to other ownerships on the slate, especially at the tight end position, George Kittle definitely looks like an awesome leverage play here. I mean, great spot versus Seattle. They're not good versus tight ends. They're not good versus the pass. They're not good defensively, no matter which way you cut it up, really. 27th DB versus the pass this year, and they're 23rd versus tight ends. And Kittle is just one of the most talented, if not the most talented tight end in the NFL. He currently is the highest predicted tight end that I have currently, not point per dollar wise, that does belong to Foster Moreau. And if you are playing cash games, you should be playing Foster Moreau just because of the high ownership and he makes things fit from an optimal lineup construction. But Kittle, I mean, he's grading out very well for me. And again, no Deebo Samuel. You take him off the field, that's a lot of vacated targets. Like, yeah, Brandon Ayuk gets a nice bump. And I forgot about even mentioning Brandon Ayuk. A lot of people are going to play Brandon Ayuk as well. So George Kittle is definitely going to go a bit overlooked here on the season, averaging 6 targets per game, 21% target share. Take Deebo off, a guy that's usually getting double-digit targets, is a massive bump. And George Kittle should definitely be a beneficiary of that. His props really aren't that enticing for me. 51.5 on prize picks, 53.5 over on DK. You're not getting a ton of value there, but I could definitely see him going over that and hopefully gets into the end zone to smash that price point below 6K. And moving on to our third and final GPP core play of the week, we have Alexander Mattison, RB1 for the Minnesota Vikings with no Dalvin Cook this weekend. And it's not that he's going to get completely overlooked. People are going to play Alexander Mattison, but because of the price hike and because of all the other pricing for the running backs this weekend, which are way too soft, similar to Joe Mixon, he'll be a little bit under-owned than what I think he should be. Because this is a smash spot versus Detroit. He doesn't have to worry about anybody else stealing carries. He's going to get pretty much all the work here. And in the 2 games that Dalvin Cook has missed this year, and Alexander Mattison through the start, he's absolutely smashed. 25 carries and 26 carries, and also over 5 targets in both of those games. So we're talking over 30 total opportunities in both the games that Dalvin Cook happened to miss. And now he gets a fantastic matchup versus Detroit. It was actually one of the teams he faced with no Dalvin Cook this year, and he had 30.3 points against them. So I realize the price is a lot higher than normal for Alexander Mattison, but I mean, I have a hard time not liking him here. Projections, he grades out well. It's just ownership projection-wise. A lot of people feel more comfortable with guys like Jonathan Taylor up top. They also like the mid-range running backs, which I totally understand. So Mattison and Mixon kind of in that weird zone, like the gray zone, where they're going to get a little bit overlooked, and they'll be underplayed to where they really should be on this slate. You're getting some pretty good leverage there. And for those of you on price picks, he's sitting at 74.5 for his rushing yards prop. DraftKings has him at 80.5, although I will say the juice is on the under for 80.5, but he's still a good play on the DFS nonetheless. But with that being said, that'll probably be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you would like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, check out the Patreon, lots of extra content over there. Ownership projections, optimizers, cheat sheets, all that fun stuff that can be found down below. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by PrizePicks. Just you versus the projections, and as of right now, if you're new sign over there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100, so it's free money when you use it to your advantage when you go to prizepicks.com, or you can use the link down below and use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. I think that'll be it. I will stop rambling. I wish you guys the best of luck this weekend, and I'll see you in the next one.